markets in a different light. Franklin Templeton Investments. Gain from our perspective.
And by ExxonMobil. This program was made possible by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Where We Stand, America's Schools in the 21st Century investigates the efficacy of public education in the U.S. Tomorrow night at 11.
For more information about investing, you may order Nightly Business Reports home video, the NBR Guide to Stock Market Strategies, by calling 1-800-535-5864. This program is available in either the VHS or DVD formats.
Trusted, in-depth, independent. This is PBS.
Saturday afternoons here at OPB are informative and entertaining. From the newest auto trends to home renovation, there seems to be something of interest for just about everybody. And now these shows are at new times, so check your local listings to make sure you don't miss your favorite. Same great shows, new times. We'll see you there.
I'm Jim Lara. On the next NewsHour, the latest on the financial crisis and part one of our new close-up series about the candidates and leadership. That's Monday on the NewsHour.
Some things are hard, but supporting OPB is easy. Become a sustaining member today and never worry about your membership renewal again. For more information, call 1-800-241-8123 or visit opb.org/sustain.
This week on Oregon Art Beat, we'll follow a student at the Oregon College of Art and Craft as he goes through his final thesis year. Josh Smith creates pieces to demonstrate his skill after 4 years studying the art of woodworking. And meet the women who make up Dirty Martini. These talented songwriters have been blending their voices and winning lots of fans ever since they first played together, almost by accident.
Join us Thursday at 8 p.m. Shop OPB.org. Support OPB and take home the programs you love. Members get a 10% discount. Shop OPB.org.
Play as time goes by.
A kiss is just a kiss.
Humphrey Bogart.
Sam, I thought I told you never to play.
Ingrid Bergman.
How much I still love you.
The American classic.
We'll always have Paris. We didn't have, we lost it until you came to Casablanca. I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
Casablanca.
Join us Thursday at 10 p.m.
When you see that logo, you know what it is. Warner Brothers.
Celebrate 85 years of Warner Brothers.
Warner Brothers pictures were ferocious.
More cynical.
Shocking.
It's a mini-series feast for film lovers. You must remember this. The Warner Brothers story.
I remember every detail.
Presented by American Masters.
Join us Tuesday at 9 p.m.
You are the purpose of our work.
The reason.
The reason we run.
The reason we serve.
We will treat you with respect.
Like our family and friends. Because you
have feelings and emotions.
We are dependent.
Dependent on you. The lifeblood. The lifeblood.
The lifeblood
of our company.
We will treat you like our business depends on it.
Because it does.
Because it does.
Because it does.
Good evening, I'm Gwen Eiffel. On the NewsHour tonight, the news of this Monday, then Congress begins hashing out the details of the administration's $700 billion Wall Street bailout plan. We hear from two lawmakers. Wall Street is transformed before our eyes, the end of the big investment banking houses. A campaign snapshot as the presidential candidates weigh in on the financial crisis. And the first in our new close-up series on the two major presidential candidates. Tonight, John McCain and leadership.
Major funding for the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer is provided by
With hard work and careful planning, Pacific Life can help you retire the way you want to. With mutual funds and life insurance. And with annuities that can guarantee an income for the rest of your life. Your financial professional and Pacific Life can help you reach your retirement goals. Pacific Life, the power to help you succeed.
With soaring energy prices and global climate change, there are good reasons for believing in wind. Wind energy is clean and plentiful, and it answers the call for sustainable ways to create the electricity we need. We know because our sole focus is developing technology that uses the energy of the wind to generate electricity. America has some of the world's most abundant wind resources, and Vestas is here to help harness them.
Chevron, the Atlantic Philanthropies, and with the ongoing support of these institutions and foundations. And
this program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
The price of oil soared and stocks plunged today over jitters about the government's massive financial rescue plan. Oil was up more than $25 at one point on concerns the plan would weaken the dollar. Ultimately, the price in New York ended at nearly $121 a barrel, up more than $16. In response, the Dow Jones Industrial Average fell more than 372 points to close at 11,015. The Nasdaq lost almost 95 points to close just below 2179. The market's anxiety was stoked by a struggle over the shape of the rescue plan. The Bush administration asked for $700 billion over 2 years to buy shaky mortgages and other bad debts from banks. Democrats demanded a one-year program with more oversight and help for homeowners. That sparked jousting by leaders in the Senate.
Republicans have many serious questions about this plan, but this is the only concrete plan we have seen so far that aims to protect Americans on Main Street, to protect their homes, their savings, their retirement plans, to protect endangered jobs and small businesses. And we shouldn't jeopardize that effort by delaying urgent action or playing partisan politics.
Democrats in the Senate aren't going to drag our feet. We'll respond with the urgency of action that this situation demands. But after 8 years of fiscal dereliction of duty, it's time for accountability. Mr. President, it's taken 8 years of this dereliction of duty. Should we resolve the issue in one day? I think not.
Later, a key Senate Republican, Richard Shelby, warned the Treasury plan is neither workable nor comprehensive. But a top House Democrat, Barney Frank, said the administration had agreed to greater oversight and mortgage assistance. The world's leading economic powers pledged today to help ease the financial crisis. The group of 7 nations also endorsed moves the U.S. government has taken. In a statement, they said they are ready to take whatever actions may be necessary. The presidential candidates joined calls today for greater oversight of any financial rescue. Republican John McCain said it makes him deeply uncomfortable to give so much power to the Treasury Secretary. Democrat Barack Obama said the country cannot give a blank check to Washington. We'll have more on the campaign later in the program. The deadly truck bombing of a Marriott hotel in Pakistan may have narrowly missed the country's leaders. We have a report on the weekend attack and its aftermath, narrated by Jonathan Rugman of Independent Television News.
This is what half a ton of explosives does to a 5-star hotel. The burned-out Islamabad Marriott, now a skeleton of its former self. And it's claimed that Pakistan's president, prime minister and armed forces chiefs could have been among those who died here had they not changed their dinner plans at the last minute. The bomb crater is 25 foot deep and 60 foot wide. Pakistan's Interior Ministry today made the astonishing admission that the attackers may have known that Pakistan's leadership was due to eat here. The hotel's owner denies there was any government booking, and we don't know precisely when the president's plans changed. But at best, this attack marks a major security lapse. At worst, an intelligence leak at the heart of the political establishment. This was the moment when the truck laden with explosives crashed into the hotel's front barrier. Moments later, the driver appears to blow himself up. For over 3 minutes, the front of the truck burns, but the bomb itself has still not gone off. The guards find a fire extinguisher, but it doesn't put the flames out. These the final images, before the truck explodes in a huge ball of fire. 2 American Marines were among the dead, and 6 Britons among the injured, though most of the casualties were Pakistani. Tonight, a group calling itself the Partisans of Islam telephoned an Arabic television station, claiming that it carried out the attack. Amongst its demands, that Pakistan end its cooperation with the United States.
In other developments, the U.S. denied reports that an American helicopter crossed the Pakistani border today and was fired on by Pakistani troops. And gunmen kidnapped Afghanistan's ambassador-designate and killed his driver in Pakistan's northwest. The capital of Somalia was engulfed today in its worst fighting in months. At least 30 people died in mortar attacks on a market in Mogadishu. 60 more were wounded. Islamic militants with ties to al-Qaeda have been fighting the Somalian government and its Ethiopian ally since late 2006. President Thabo Mbeki of South Africa will leave office Thursday after being forced out by his ruling party. The African National Congress recalled Mbeki over the weekend in a power struggle with ANC President Jacob Zuma. Today, Zuma did not name an interim president, but he suggested his deputy might do.
We have in cabinet many experienced ministers, including the deputy president of the ANC, Comrade Kgalema Motlanthe. I'm convinced that if given that responsibility, he would be equal to the task.
Zuma himself hopes to win South Africa's presidential election next year. In the meantime, he still faces allegations of corruption. The head of the Chinese agency that monitors food safety resigned today over tainted baby formula. So far, 4 babies have died in China. Hospitals and clinics were crowded today with more parents taking their children in for checkups. Nearly 53,000 babies have gotten sick. Chinese milk products have now been recalled or banned in much of Asia. Utility crews in Texas continued making slow progress today in turning the lights back on after Hurricane Ike. 875,000 people remained in the dark more than a week after the storm hit. Galveston remained closed to most residents until Wednesday, but in Houston, schools reopened for the first time since the storm. Veteran journalist and author Nancy Hicks Maynard died Sunday after a long illness. She was a leading advocate for newsroom diversity. In 1968, at the age of 23, Maynard became one of the youngest reporters and the first black woman to report for the metropolitan staff of the New York Times. In 1983, she and her husband Bob bought and co-published the Oakland Tribune, the only major metropolitan daily ever to be black-owned. Bob Maynard died in 1993. Nancy Maynard was 61 years old. That's it for the news summary tonight. Now, hammering out a deal, the end of investment banking, the candidates on the financial crisis, and close up on John McCain, the decider. The debate over a bailout for the financial system. Ray Suarez begins our coverage.
The Washington debate began in earnest today over the bailout package proposed this weekend by the Bush administration. Treasury Secretary Henry Paulson, the administration's point man on the crisis, outlined the stakes in a series of Sunday morning talk show appearances.
This is not something that we wanted to do. This is something that is very necessary. The system was clogging up, and it was more difficult for companies to raise financing.
The Treasury's draft proposal grants the Secretary nearly unlimited power in spending up to $700 billion to buy mortgage-related assets from ailing financial institutions. Both American companies and international firms with U.S. assets are eligible. Periodic reports to Congress are due, but with little oversight of the program. And the proposal raises the national debt ceiling to more than $11 trillion to allow for the bailout. Paulson explained on ABC what led to the present problem and how his solution might work.
We had a situation where American companies weren't able to borrow money. This could ultimately affect small banks, loans to businesses, loans to farmers, jobs, people's retirement. What we are recommending is that the government buy illiquid assets in big size from the institutions. These are what are clogging up the system so that they can play their role they need to play.
There was concern among many on Capitol Hill that the proposal gave too much money and untrammeled power to the Treasury. Brad Sherman, Democrat of California.
Why should the Department of the Treasury have total carte blanche? We should require that every major contract entered into under this bill and every purchase of toxic assets be approved in advance by the GAO. Otherwise, this is just a license to the Treasury to hand out money in return for trash, cash for trash, and they get to decide who to do it.
Democrats also objected to the plan's Wall Street focus, lamenting a lack of protection for the people whose faulty mortgages are the root of the problem. Various Democratic counterproposals included provisions that limit executive pay for firms asking for the bailout, greater congressional and independent agency oversight of the program, give the government an equity stake in the companies that are seeking a bailout, and help homeowners renegotiate mortgage terms. However, the House Minority Leader, John Boehner of Ohio, said yesterday the Bush administration proposal should be passed quickly and without the add-ons.
We don't need 535 members of Congress adding their best idea to this bill. We need to keep it clean, simple, move it through the House and Senate, and get it on the president's desk.
But Mr. Boehner may get significant resistance from his own side of the aisle, which has raised many questions about the slate of recent bailouts, including the government takeovers of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and the private insurance firm AIG. Cliff Stearns is a Republican from Florida.
Through these bailouts, our federal government is effectively risking hard-earned taxpayers' dollars to protect private sector companies that utilize reckless investment strategies with little regard to the consequences.
Stearns and other members of the House Conservative Caucus echo many of the concerns across party lines now the Treasury has produced its sweeping plan.
Margaret Warner has more on the Capitol Hill reaction.
And for that, we're joined by Senator Christopher Dodd, Democrat from Connecticut. As Banking Committee Chairman, he's taking a lead role in managing the bailout legislation. And Senator Jon Kyl of Arizona. He's the #2 Republican in the Senate. Welcome to you both. Thanks for being with us. Senator Dodd, where do negotiations stand as of now?
Well, we're working well. I was just saying to John that this afternoon I had very good meetings with Senator Schumer, the Democrat from New York, a member of the Banking Committee, and Senator Bob Bennett, Chuck Hagel, Mel Martinez, Bob Corker, all members of the Republican aisle on the Banking Committee. And nothing's been resolved here, but we're working with the common points here. And that is, I've talked, of course, over the week, the last 3 days, almost non-sleep, maybe 40 or 50 members, including many Democrats as well, with various ideas. The overall thrust I would share with this, there'll be some people who are going to be against this no matter what we do. The overall membership, I think, as I've talked to them, believe we need to do something. Inaction is not acceptable. But clearly, we're not going to write a check for $700 billion and walk away. Accountability issues, taxpayer concerns, what we do with the foreclosure issue are all legitimate issues that people are raising. Some maybe have more items they want to add, others less, but all of it kind of focused on the issue. No one wants to turn this into a Christmas tree. So I feel very positive at this point. We've got a lot of work to do over the next 3 or 4 days, but I'm optimistic we can come to a bipartisan result here that will allow the Secretary to move, but simultaneously give us the assurance that we're not just going to turn over a check and walk away.
Senator Kyl, help us understand how these negotiations are proceeding. Is there a sort of unified Republican position and a unified Democratic position as you understand it, or no, I see you laughing. Go ahead.
My colleague Chris is chuckling, and I am too. No, the answer is no. This is one of those things, first of all, that nobody wants to have to do. Secretary Paulson started out, he said, I didn't come to Washington to do this. I hate that we have to do it. And I think a lot of members of Congress are wanting to work constructively together to see if we can put together a bill that satisfies the objections in a very short period of time, which is what Chris was just now talking about. There are others who are not going to be supportive of this on both sides of the aisle, I suspect. What's basically happened is that the Department of Treasury has produced a draft of the legislation. There have been some additions to that draft from members of the House Democratic side, as I understand it. I have been trying to get some ideas to the Treasury Department. Chris just mentioned the meeting that he's had. There is not I would say, a really coherent set of negotiations here, except to the extent that Treasury is being bombarded with a million ideas, and they're trying to accommodate, I think, as many of them as make sense within the short period of time. And the only thing I would add is this. If this is going to be done, some of the good ideas on both sides of the aisle are going to have to await another day. Part of the necessity here is to get this done with alacrity. I think the market's reaction today is a good indication that we don't have a whole lot of time to get this done. So there are some good ideas and some maybe not so good ideas that are going to have to be left to the side for another day if we're going to get it done.
Senator Dodd, help us with the process here. Senator Kyl said some of his fellow Republicans, or he's channeling some Republican suggestions to Treasury. Is that the process, or are you writing an amended bill, essentially?
Well, again, and John is right. There's not a coherent approach on this point because we're doing something extraordinary. John and I were in the room last Thursday evening when we heard some rather dramatic descriptions of the condition of our economy. We have about a week or so left here before we adjourn, before the elections. Normally you'd have a bill in the Senate, a bill in the House, you'd go back and forth, and this would take a normal amount of time where good ideas would be explored, examined, and rejected or accepted. We're trying here to bring everyone together at one moment in time on an extraordinary request. This is twice the cost of the Iraq War, $700 billion. In 41 days, we're going to have a new president. I presume within hours after that choice being made, they're going to announce maybe who the new Secretary of the Treasury is apt to be. So it isn't just this Treasury, or Treasury Secretary, but the one that will follow this one, who will also be charged with handling all of this, and therefore there are legitimate questions. Can we do this? John's correct. We need to move quickly. I would add, and I would hope we'd all agree, it's just as important we do this correctly if we can. That we don't want to look back, because there isn't a second act to this. There's not another $700 billion if this plan doesn't work for us to come back to. So while it's important to move quickly, it's also important to move with a clear purpose in mind as to how this will work. The accountability provisions are very important to people. Secondly, of course, making sure that taxpayers are going to be protected and first in line if we hope, as we do, that these assets will eventually produce revenues that can come back. So I'm trying to build a consensus with my committee, Democrats and Republicans, where I can, to be able to say to the leadership, we've got something working here, working with Barney Frank in the House, as I know he's trying to work as well, and then simultaneously with the Treasury, so that they will accept these ideas or give us a good reason why they ought to be rejected. And hopefully we can do that in the next 2 or 3 days.
Now, Senator Kyl, let me ask you about a couple of ideas that certainly the Democrats have proposed on paper, and some of your colleagues and you on the Sunday talk shows yesterday also indicated an interest. One is some kind of layer of oversight over Treasury as they manage this. That's so-called accountability. And also some kind of perhaps an ownership stake in the companies that agree to or that ask to be bailed out here. Are Republicans on board for those two things?
Well, let me take the second one first, and I don't want to get down too much into the weeds, but my understanding from Treasury is that they want to do this, first of all, to take the easiest assets to buy. And those are assets that you simply buy. It's commercial paper that you would buy on the market. There's no point in taking an ownership stake in any company when you do that. But they may eventually get to the point where there are some other troubled institutions that have some assets on the books that the United States could profitably take over. And in those situations, because of the nature of the institution, they may need to strike a separate bargain with them, something like the bailout of an AIG or one of the other companies that we've bailed out, in which case, of course, you would want to have an equity position in order to protect the taxpayer. The other thing I think is critical here is protecting the taxpayer is number one. And several of the ideas that I conveyed today were designed to try to build in the protection of the taxpayer. The more we do that, the less oversight from somebody on the outside we're going to need. There will be congressional oversight of this. But rather than, at least personally, me worrying about some kind of oversight board, I'd like to start, and I'm sure Chris agrees with this, to make sure that the language in the legislation authorizing the Secretary to act provides pretty specific guidelines as to how he's supposed to approach setting the price for these assets and how he's going to go about acquiring them so that we have the best chance possible to make sure that at the end of the day, the taxpayers will get their money back.
Senator Dodd, in our limited time, let me ask you about two of the real biggies that many Democrats and many Republicans have talked about. One is some limit on executive compensation of the countries that get bailed out, and the other is to help homeowners who are at risk of foreclosure, in addition to helping the banks who are at risk of having their assets that they can't sell. So are you near agreement with the administration on either of those? Barney Frank said today that in fact they did seem amenable to helping the homeowners at risk of foreclosure.
Well, I hope so, because again, again, Ben Bernanke, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, and Hank Paulson have said repeatedly over the last number of weeks that, of course, the cause of this problem, a preventable problem in some ways, had there been a more aggressive action on the foreclosure problem earlier on, is still at the heart of this. These mortgage-backed securities, the bulk of which are residential mortgages that are not worth much.
But my question is, do you think you're close to some agreement, at least in concept, that should be part of this bill?
Well, I believe it should, and I think there are a number of people who agree with that. Otherwise, we're back at this problem again until you deal with the cause of it. Dealing with executive compensation is thornier for some. It's probably more of an optics issue than dealing with the issue itself. But again, if you're investing $700 billion of taxpayer money, what the public would be irate over is if in some of these companies where we're buying this junk and getting it off their books, that they turn around and end up having contracts that reward them with multi-million-dollar compensation packages. I can't begin to describe to you the anger we would receive from people if we didn't try to address that as well.
Senator Kyle, I know you said there's no real agreement here, but let me just ask you, is there an emerging consensus among Senate Republicans on either of those two issues, whether something should be added to help homeowners here at risk, that is, renegotiate their mortgages, and two, some way to limit executive compensation or what is considered excessive compensation if these companies turn for help?
I'm sorry. Yes, I think the answer to both questions is yes. I understand that there have been a lot of proposals conveyed to Treasury, and they're trying to figure out what to do on the executive compensation and have some ideas on that. And that with respect to the language on foreclosures, I've actually seen language which looks to me pretty good, because what it does is to use this new process to actually make a law that was just passed and became effective on July 30th to actually have a better chance of working. It sets up $300 billion worth of mortgages to be reworked, and what this language would do is to encourage the Secretary to find those loans that are in that category that could be reworked as part of the loans that are acquired under this new program.
Quick final word. Senator Dodd, Senator Kyle, does this have to be done this week?
Well, it should be done soon. And again, I think speed is important, but I want to emphasize to you, getting it right, we're going to live with this for decades to come now, so we better do it right as well.
Do you think it has to be done this week, Senator Kyle?
I do. I agree with Chris. It's got to be done right, but this is one of those things where there is an emergency, and the kind of time that we would ordinarily put into one of these things is not available to us now. So I think by the end of the week or early part of next week, we'd better have it done, or the market is going to react in a pretty negative way.
Senator Kyle, Senator Dodd, thank you both.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Next, the continued reshaping of Wall Street. Jeffrey Brown has that story.
The end of an era came last night with the announcement that the last two major investment banking firms, Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs, would convert themselves into bank holding companies. Andrew Ross Sorkin is covering that part of the financial crisis story for the New York Times. He's also the editor of Dealbox, the paper's business blog. So, Andrew, why did this happen? Was there finally a sense that it had come down to changing the business or not surviving?
I think we were really at the precipice, and when you look at what Goldman and Morgan were up against, they were the next two dominoes, if you will, to fall, to falter. And I think really this is a tacit acknowledgement that the old model of Wall Street, at least as we know it, and what I mean by that is the investment banking model of effectively trading, what they call proprietary trading, almost like a hedge fund, using your own money to make huge bets, oftentimes with lots of leverage on top of that, wasn't going to work in this world anymore. And going forward, what they really needed was a cushion, and that's what commercial banks have historically had. They've had that cushion of those deposits from you and myself and all those people who use ATM machines, and that has made them, at least in this environment, the safe haven.
So that's the theory is that this will help shore them up, but you're saying it's because of the deposits?
Well, that's what may shore them up in the short term. But I think the larger story here is that investment banking, as you and I have known it for so many years, is really going away. You know, the culture of Wall Street, the lavish bonuses, the amount of money people have made over the years isn't going to happen anymore. It really is a very, very different world. And to tell you that something radical has happened overnight, I know it just sounds like you're going from an investment bank to a bank holding company, which doesn't sound like it sounds like a distinction without a difference, but it really is something quite meaningful. And going forward, I think what you're going to see out of Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley is they're going to become Goliaths in the same way you think of Citigroup or JP Morgan or Bank of America, all of those firms, commercial banks, bank holding companies, if you will, that have huge amounts of deposits that have made them in this environment, as I said before, considered safer havens.
But in exchange for this kind of a change, they subject themselves to a new regulatory system. So explain how that's going to affect their business.
Well, absolutely. You know, when you think about what the distinction, without a difference, the distinction actually is with a difference. The distinction between an investment bank and commercial bank is huge. Commercial banks historically have been regulated quite highly, in part because they've had access to the discount window and all sorts of other benefits that they've had from the government. Now, one of the things for so many years is that the investment banks have said, no, 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 we don't want this. We don't want to be regulated. But you know, one of the things that's really going to happen is what we were talking about before, the change with leverage. Regulators are going to say you can't lever yourself up. You know, for every dollar you put in, you can borrow an additional $30, which is frankly what Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley were doing for so many years. And frankly, that's how they created such large profits.
They have to have more capitals. They have to have more capital on hand, right?
That's exactly right, but what that means is that the profits come down, the profit margins come down. Those seven-figure bonuses that had been handed out to mid-level executives just won't exist anymore. And it really, I think, is going to change the fundamental nature of what you think an investment banker is.
Now, so the profits come down, but in theory, so does the risk. At least that's the idea.
That is the idea.
Now, Morgan Stanley also announced today that it was a Japanese bank, Mitsubishi, was taking a 20% stake in it. Now, that's part of it. Again, these banks, these investment banks, having to shore up their capital, right?
That's exactly what this is about. You know, when you think about the Japanese coming in and giving them, you know, taking up 20% of the capital base, that's really huge. Last week, if you watched Morgan Stanley's stock price, it plunged. Beyond that, people stopped trading with them. There stopped being a belief, a confidence that this company was going to survive going forward. And so if you put the investment by the Japanese and on top of that, what the government's doing at the Fed and turning them into a bank holding company, I think this is saying that the government and the Japanese mean this company is not going to fail. That's what this is really about.
How quickly can the kind of changes we're talking about happen?
You know, when you think about the changes, they're probably going to happen over the course of about 24 months, 2 years. What has to happen is an enormous amount of regulatory effort that's going to take place, obligations that the banks are going to have, and it really is a transformation that is going to take some period of time. But in the end, it probably will take about 2 years, and I think when you watch Wall Street over the next 2 years, we're going to really see a huge distinction. If we have this conversation in 2010, we're going to be talking about a very different place.
All right, now let me ask you just in our last minute, not about 2 years from now, but just about today, because the jitters continued on Wall Street today, a drop of 370 points, the price of oil, the biggest gain ever. What was going on? What were people telling you?
Well, I think there were two things going on. One is that this $700 billion bailout actually, in many ways, is pushing the price of oil up because people are saying that where are we going to get this money from, and that's devaluing the dollar. And so I think that is putting a lot of jitters into the market. And then the other side of this is that I think there's lots of questions still in the marketplace about whether the $700 billion deal gets done, how it gets done, what structure it takes, and all of the euphoria on Friday. I think people took the weekend and started thinking about it, and it didn't look as euphoric as it did on Friday afternoon.
All right, Andrew Ross Sorkin, I misnamed the your blog at the paper. It's Deal Book. Sorry about that. Thanks,
Jeff.
Thanks for joining us.
With only a little over 6 weeks to go before Election Day, the economic crisis is also making itself felt on the campaign trail. Both major presidential candidates focused on it today.
True economic recovery requires addressing not just the crisis on Wall Street, but the crisis on Main Street.
The administration's evolving bailout plan was topic A for both candidates today. Campaigning in Wisconsin, Democrat Barack Obama emphasized the consequences of any potential solution.
We need a plan that helps families stay in their homes and workers keep their jobs. A plan that gives hardworking Americans relief instead of using taxpayer dollars to reward CEOs on Wall Street. And we cannot give a blank check to Washington with no oversight and no accountability, when no oversight and accountability is exactly what got us into this mess in the first place.
But McCain, Obama said, is part of the problem.
Let's be clear. When it comes to regulatory reform, Senator McCain has fought time and time again against the common sense rules of the road that could have prevented this crisis. John McCain voted for those laws and those policies again and again and again, and he now claims that he's the one who can clean it all up.
My plan is about keeping people in their homes and safeguarding the life savings of all Americans by protecting our financial system and capital markets. Those are our priorities.
In Pennsylvania, Republican John McCain said government oversight should be expanded beyond the Treasury Secretary.
I'm greatly concerned about the plan that gives a single individual the unprecedented power to spend $1 trillion without any meaningful accountability. Never before in the history of our nation has so much power and money been concentrated in the hands of one person, a person I admire and respect a great deal, Secretary Paulson. This arrangement makes me deeply uncomfortable. We won't solve a problem caused by poor oversight with a plan that has no oversight. And part of the reason we're facing this crisis is an antiquated regulatory system of uncoordinated agencies that just haven't been doing their job. We must help keep people in their homes. We must protect American savings, and we must keep students with loans in school.
Obama also promised to cut $40 billion in government spending. The McCain campaign dismissed his plan as all talk and taxes. Here to help explain what the candidates are saying and what it means are Amy Walter, editor-in-chief of The Hotline, National Journal's Political Daily, also New York Times political reporter Jackie Calmes. Welcome to you both. Amy, what is it that they were saying, or were they trying to say, and what does it mean?
Two very good questions. They both sound like they're saying basically the same thing, right? Washington is broken, Wall Street's broken, we're going to both fix it up, partly by doing more oversight, partly by going out and doing some long-term plans. But basically, it feels a lot like a disinfectant kind of policy, which is we're going to open this up, clean things out. And the problem right now, I think, for a lot of voters is it still doesn't necessarily address what's happening today and what the bailout plan could mean for them specifically. And I think part of the problem is these guys don't quite know yet exactly what the plan is going to look like. It's not been hammered out yet. So right now they're talking about more long-term solutions, you know, as you heard in the piece here, making sure that taking out the lobbyists, keeping it more open, making sure there's more oversight, so that fundamentally that's the focus that they're on now. As senators, of course, they're ultimately going to have to vote on something, and right now we don't know exactly what that is.
So, Jackie, given that these are two very different candidates, how different have been their approaches to this, and how much alike?
Well, like Amy said, they do sound exactly alike, and their approaches, it's really too early to tell what they would do. They're both talking about protecting the taxpayer, number one, and number two, curbing chief executives of these companies, curbing their compensation, which is a very popular thing to say, of course. And this is one of the demands that Democrats in Congress are making of the administration now as a quid pro quo for approving this $700 billion asset swap plan. And I say asset swap plan because while it is a bailout, certainly the biggest in history probably, what really the candidates are doing is sort of feeding the public's confusion about just what this is, because ultimately $700 billion won't be spent. Some of that will come back in the term when these assets are resold. But it's all feeding this idea that that the voters are confused. I think we're at a watershed moment right now, and this the reaction and that they're hearing from voters, and in Congress that's being reflected, that is sort of raising questions about this plan. You see today the stock market closed 373 points down.
You know, Amy, as we listen to these candidates, we try to put the real policy action that they talk about onto what kind of candidates they're trying to be and who the voters are trying to appeal to. So when they both talk about deregulation, and we hear John McCain say things like Andrew Cuomo would be a Democrat, would be a good secretary, a good head of the Security and Exchange Commission. Who's he speaking to with a comment like that?
Right, and when Barack Obama's plan, by the way, it's an 11-page plan called, this is literally what it's called, Plan to Reform the Greed and Excesses of Washington.
Yeah.
Right? Who could that be going to? So when 80% of voters in this country say things are off on the wrong track and we want a new direction, and when Congress's approval rating is somewhere in the teens, that's exactly who they're trying to talk to. These voters who say, I want change, I clearly think that things are going the wrong way, but I don't quite know yet who's going to bring that to me. And what I find fascinating too is we have two candidates right now talking about plans, about big economic problems for this country, and yet when they were asked the other night on 60 Minutes, okay, well, given the fact, and as Jackie points out, it may not be $700 billion, but we don't know what the debt is going to look like once they take office, but it's going to be a lot bigger than it is today. Don't you think you should maybe scale back on a lot of these campaign promises you've been making? No.
Well,
no, we don't need to do that at all.
Yeah, well, that's another question, Jackie, which is we have the Republican talking about the increased need for oversight and regulation, and the Democrat talking about today, we heard Barack Obama talking about spending cuts, even though his health care plan alone would cost a lot more money. How do these things all, how can they be explained?
Well, I think we are truly at a watershed moment, perhaps, in our politics right now that's going to amount to a turn from the time going back to the, when Ronald Reagan came to Washington 30 years ago nearly, that deregulation was in vogue. And if you talked about regulating business, you had to defend it the only way you could really pass new regulations is if it had some public good like clean air, clean water. But now, you see John McCain's on the defensive about regulations or deregulation after a career spent promoting that idea. And it's the Democrats who have been on the defensive for over a quarter century when they talked about regulations are now boasting about it. And when it comes to spending, neither Barack Obama nor John McCain's talk of spending cuts would come near to addressing the deficits we're facing. And that was even before we started spending this money on bailing out Wall Street. And, John McCain, the earmarks, that would be like a rounding error in the size of the deficit if you did away with every one of them, which of course you won't. And then Barack Obama, like you say, is sticking with his plans. He says we'll save money when we end the war in Iraq. Well, that's hardly money you can take to the bank. And so it's going to be, we've gotten to the point where you wonder, why would anyone want to be president?
Well, there is that question. But, there's also one more thing, which is there's a subtext. There are a couple subtexts going on. One is about taxes and taxation, but the other is who is advising whom. We hear a lot, Amy, especially in advertising, campaign advertising, about who is more credible on this issue based on who his advisors are.
Right. And I think for most voters, that kind of goes over their head. I mean, inside Washington, we talk about a lot of these names we're seeing thrown around right now on the campaign tube, who worked for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and whose advisors were once lobbyists. Right now, it seems sort of a wash right now in terms of the back and forth on this. The reality is, yes, John McCain has been in Washington a lot longer than Barack Obama, so it would seem that this would be an attack that would stick much more to him than Obama. However, John McCain comes into this campaign with very high favorable ratings. He has already an established identity as something of a maverick. This is not a traditional Republican candidate, so he gets a benefit of the doubt here that I think another Republican candidate who spend as much time in Washington as McCain wouldn't get. Obama, meanwhile, doesn't have as much time in Washington, but anytime you've been around Washington, anytime you're doing work in politics, you're going to be around insiders. Yeah, you're around, and you're also around insiders. I mean, I think this is part of the problem when you're trying to run against Washington from Washington. It becomes a very difficult argument to make.
Amy Walter and Jackie Calmes, thank you both very much.
Thanks.
Thanks, Gwen.
Now, part one of our election year close-up series. First, the candidates and leadership, as seen by the people who know them well. Tonight, Judy Woodruff reports on John McCain as a decision maker.
Thank you.
To understand how Senator John McCain makes decisions, a good place to begin is his vice presidential pick.
Don't you think we made the right choice for the next vice president of the United States?
The Arizona senator's decision to choose a first-term governor of Alaska over personal favorites like independent Democrat Joe Lieberman or more familiar figures involved both politics and instinct, says senior campaign advisor, South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham.
Senator Lieberman was a potential choice. Now, every Republican operative was saying, no, don't go down that road, it'd divide the party. You had his old buddy Tom Ridge, who he just loves and respects and adores, but he's pro-choice. That would have created a conflict. John wanted to make a statement with his pick. And when he looked at Governor Palin, he saw in her a bit of himself. He wants to let the American people know that if he gets to be president, buckle your seat, because we're going to do things different.
Graham, a close friend of McCain's, insists it was a calculated move and not a spontaneous roll of the dice.
I'm not so sure it's impulse, certainly from his gut. John knows what he wants to do when he gets to be president.
I've been called a maverick. Now we have a team of mavericks that's going to...
McCain has long been described as a maverick, a title he's happy to brandish. As evidence, he touts his work with Democrats on issues like campaign finance and immigration reform. McCain's staffers describe a boss who makes decisions outside of partisan pressures.
He has a concept of party, he believes in his party, but he's more than happy to cross the aisle. And he does it all the time to the anguish of those who demand party unity.
Mark Busey is McCain's Senate office chief of staff. Busey started working for the senator 17 years ago as an intern.
The Senate leadership used to get very frustrated with him when they would do their whip checks, their vote counts in advance of votes. He wouldn't answer. He wouldn't give an answer. His answer would be, I'll vote how I want to vote. He wouldn't let them count his vote necessarily. He doesn't do the daily attendance check.
What's that?
In the Senate, every morning they check to see what members are there so that they know, what might happen. We don't respond to that. While he respects the leadership, he respects their jobs, he's not there to serve them.
Republican John Kyle, the other Arizona senator, has known McCain for over 20 years and says much of McCain's decision-making style can be attributed to his military experience.
I think partly as a result of his background in the United States Navy and partly because of his personality and his disposition. John goes a lot on instincts. He's peripatetic. He covers a lot of ground in a short period of time. And so he's not one to sit around and ponder and wring his hands and try to figure out what the right thing is. He's got an idea right off. And then he'll take advice from his advisors, his staff, and others around him. But he makes a judgment relatively quickly, sticks with it, doesn't look back, and in that sense, he's a leader that bases a lot of what he decides on his instinct, on his judgment, and his sense of what's right and wrong and proper.
As an example, Kyle points to an international crisis that flared between Russia and the Republic of Georgia.
Today, we are all Georgians.
John McCain immediately had an idea of what was right and wrong. He immediately had a view about what should be said about it in criticism of the Russian invasion, and he did it. He didn't get any advice from advisors on that. That was pure John McCain.
In his book, Worth the Fighting For, McCain himself describes his instinctive approach.
As a politician, I am instinctive, often impulsive.
McCain goes on to say, I don't torture myself over decisions. I make them as quickly as I can, quicker than the other fellow if I can. Often my haste is a mistake, but I live with the consequences without complaint.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
But that quick-to-decide approach gives pause to some. Former Colorado Democratic Senator Gary Hart, a one-time presidential candidate himself, befriended McCain when McCain was the Navy liaison to the Senate. Hart later served as a groomsman in John and Cindy McCain's wedding.
On a scale of pure intuitive, pure impulsive versus pure cerebral, pure analytical, I'd put him very much on the former end. Now, a smart guy or he wouldn't be where he is, but I think he'd be the first to say he's not a rocket scientist or a pure analytical brain, if you will. I think John reacts to things.
Thanks again. Great to be with you, folks.
Hart says he has great respect for McCain, but is supporting Barack Obama for president.
I have hesitation, probably would have were John McCain a Democrat, about a personality in the Oval Office who is more impulsive and intuitive, if you will, than analytical and thoughtful. Now, John McCain is not seat of the pants. I don't want to give the impression that he just, whatever he had for breakfast, makes the decision of going to war. It's not quite like that. But I think, again, on a scale, I'd prefer somebody who's a little more thoughtful, a little less impulsive, and a little more analytical.
Longtime Congress watcher Norman Ornstein worked alongside Senator McCain on campaign finance legislation.
John McCain is a fighter pilot. A lot of his persona comes from being a fighter pilot. This is a man who not only constantly questions authority, but is fond of making last-minute, from-the-gut, impulsive, risk-taking decisions and believing to his bones that there may be a risk here, but it will pay off. An impulsive decision-making style is fine if you're riding a jet. An impulsive decision-making style is fine if you're piloting a jet in combat. It's fine if you're a senator, where the consequences are not going to be that long-lasting. It's a real question mark when you move into the presidency.
I want to promise you
McCain's sometimes passionate personality has led some to call him a hothead. Stories of McCain's temper are legendary. Charges staff members dismiss.
He's passionate, especially if you want to have a debate with him over an issue that he cares about. He will fight for the issues. And, you know, is that the most collegial of things to do in the United States Senate, the greatest old boys club in this country? No. It upsets people. They expect this deference. He doesn't always do that. And he gets passionate, and he will speak out.
Others who know McCain well say it's his convictions and sense of duty that drive his emotions.
He has an amazing ability to be very human, get upset, get mad when people do things he thinks are out of bounds, but never lose what's most important to the country.
But there have been times when McCain has been less willing to let go of his anger. In 1994, the Arizona Republic published an editorial cartoon mocking Cindy McCain's acknowledged addiction at the time to prescription drugs. McCain refused to speak to his hometown newspaper for a long time after, says Arizona Republic reporter Dan Nowicki.
McCain kind of cut off all communication with the paper for over a year. There's a part of McCain that's very emotional.
I work at the Department of Veterans Affairs.
On the campaign trail, the decision McCain has made his signature was his support 2 years ago for adding 30,000 troops in Iraq, what has come to be called the surge.
This strategy is succeeding. If we had withdrawn 6 months ago, I'd look you in the eye and tell you I know that al-Qaeda would have said we beat the United States of America.
We're in a room about the surge. In 2006, the Iraq war is at the bottom in terms of public approval. Our campaign is in trouble. In July of 2007, we were 5th in a 4-person race. We'd run out of money, we'd hit a wall. Republicans were afraid that Iraq was going to cost us in the next election, 2008. And when he said, I'd rather lose a campaign than a war, he meant it.
William Cohen, former Secretary of Defense, who was the best man in John McCain's second wedding, says McCain's Vietnam and prisoner of war experiences taught him the gravity of war, but that McCain's strong feelings about keeping a U.S. military presence in Iraq may also be colored by that experience.
I think John had always felt that that the U.S. gave up too soon, that that war, quote, could have been won. That was his view, that it was a political decision, not a military one, that resulted in the perceived loss. I think he still feels that way about Iraq, and so there's definitely a connection there. In terms of staying the course.
Have trouble concentrating and lose things? You may qualify for an investigational medication research study for ADHD. Call Summit Research Network at 503-228-CARE.
Your Buick Pontiac GMC dealer celebrates GM's 100th anniversary by extending employee pricing. You pay what we pay, plus you get additional cash back. 16 models deliver up to 37 miles per gallon. This Sierra 1500 extended cab with employee discount and cash back under $21,000. Almost $8,000 in discounts. Get into your Northwest Buick Pontiac GMC dealer by September 30th.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, if you were one of the many hoping, wishing, desperately pleading that once summer ended, we would stop the circular file, too bad. Here's Steve Dunn with tonight's circular file.
Maybe they were just hoping you would stop them.
Yeah, maybe that's it.
Yeah, he really knows how to hurt a guy, though, doesn't he? In tonight's circular file, let's go to Halifax County, North Carolina. That's where we find one of those stories that will truly make you shake your head. A guy walked into a supermarket, bought $150 in groceries, and paid with this, a $200 bill.
Wow.
Bearing President George W. Bush's portrait. Wow. Somewhere on the bill it says, "We like ice cream, and USA deserves a tax cut." The phony bill was presented to a cashier who accepted it and gave the guy $50 in change. The search is on for the phony bill guy, by the way.
That's just nuts. Does the cashier still have a job?
He just needs a little training.
He needs to go back to school.
Yeah, I think so. Thanks for watching. Surprised they gave the correct change back.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Fisher Communications.
Check out Rasmussen BMW's new and certified pre-owned BMW inventory at RasmussenBMW.com. Discover the values and the Rasmussen difference. Special lease and finance options are now available from BMW Financial Services.
For 8,000 Oregon foster kids, childhood is a series of challenges that few of us can imagine. To help, Sleep Country USA organizes events to provide local foster kids with warm clothes, everyday necessities, and a little fun. But they can't do it without you. To learn how you can help, click on the Foster Kids link at sleepcountry.com. Sleep Country knows not everyone can be a foster parent, but anyone can help a foster child.
I'm Mike Erickson, and I approve this message.
Kurt Schrader. His high taxes kill jobs and hurt families. Maybe that's why he doesn't pay them. That's right. After raising our taxes, Kurt Schrader didn't pay his 17 times. Schrader even refused to pay property taxes for 3 years. Schrader says taxes were so high, he couldn't afford them. Now that's irony. Kurt Schrader. Maybe if he paid his own taxes, he'd stop raising ours.
There's never been a better time to switch and save with Hyundai. Switch your MPG from 14 to 33 and you'll save up to $200 a month just in gas. Switch and save with the 33 MPG Hyundai Accent and Hyundai Elantra. Switch to the 09 Sonata and save with better gas mileage than Accord and Camry. Switch to America's best warranty and save with 10-year, 100,000-mile protection. Switch right now and save up to $2,500 cash back on Hyundai sedans. Switch and save now at your Pacific Northwest Hyundai dealers. These offers end soon.
The minute after an accident, call Leif's first. Let our trained claim specialist set up your collision claim and handle it from A to Z. Convenience? Leif's picks up your vehicle anywhere in Oregon or Washington. All with my personal guarantee. Hassle-free claim service, pre-loss repairs, you'll never pay extra, and a lifetime warranty. This is why Leif's is the Northwest #1 repair shop. I'm on your side. Leif's Auto Collision Centers.
The finest in collision repair.
Andy is the most courageous person I know. He was 22 months old and had a near-drowning accident in a swimming pool. What the insurance doesn't cover, Medicaid will. President Bush tried to cut Medicaid services, and Gordon Smith stood up to him. Gordon Smith said, "We can't let that happen." He cares about people. He cares about Oregonians. He was there for us when we needed it.
I'm Gordon Smith, and I approve this ad.
Check out Rasmussen BMW's new and certified pre-owned BMW inventory at RasmussenBMW.com. Discover the values and the Rasmussen difference. Special lease and finance options are now available from BMW Financial Services.